From a young age, Scarlett is raised to be more like a doll than a person, someone her father can show off. She's expected to follow his rules and later obey her husband once she's married. On her 20th birthday, she visited her soon-to-be husband, a duke from a very powerful family, Samuel Huntington. Once she arrived to the estate, Scarlett, excited to meet her fiance, gets greeted by Samuel, of course, but also finds a woman with him named Joshua. And Joshua is a woman that he claims to love. Samuel tells Scarlett two things that she must follow. First, Scarlett cannot bother his relationship with Joshua. And second, he and Scarlett should appear as a happy couple in the public eye. And she should have no problem with following these rules, considering how lucky she is to even be here in the first place. There's a lot of things to unpack here. First, the way Scarlett is treated like an object by her father. She's less of a daughter and more of a bargaining chip for status. And yes, I know this was considered normal at the time period, but that doesn't make it any less disgusting. Samuel isn't any better. The moment he steps into the story, he continues the cycle, viewing Scarlett not as a person, but as a convenient prop for maintaining his flawless public image. And second, the audacity for Samuel to think he's doing Scarlett a favor by marrying her. The running theme here seems to be that the men in this webtoon are trash and sees women as nothing more than objects for their own personal satisfaction. The night before their wedding, Scarlett overhears a conversation between Joshua and Samuel, where Samuel claims that Scarlett is nothing more than a baby-making machine. I'm laughing because this guy is actually so delusional. After overhearing this conversation, Scarlett realizes that her entire life has been spent like a doll for others to control. She's done being manipulated, and the first step to get out of his control, she rips up her wedding dress, literally destroying the symbol of the cage she's been trapped in. And she demands Samuel to honor one of her requests, which is to allow her to have a lover of her own, which he does agree to only if she doesn't get pregnant. Then the wedding finally happens, followed by the reception. During the party, Scarlett is injured after bumping into someone. Her glass shatters and a shard slices into her leg. Scarlett then runs off by herself. Yes, by herself, because Samuel doesn't even follow after her. For someone who claims to care so much about his public image, it's strange how little he cares about abandoning his newlywed wife right after she gets injured. But it's fine. It's fine, because how else are we going to meet Scarlett's new man? Alone in the garden, Scarlett starts to feel lightheaded. Just as she's about to collapse, a mysterious man appears and catches her. But tell me why this new man looks exactly like Samuel, but with black hair and a side part. But he grabs her and carries her to the bench, where he treats her injury by pouring some kind of liquid onto her leg. And Scarlett asks the same exact question that we're all thinking. Why the heck are you carrying a first aid kit? Because why does this man just have that on him? He tells Scarlett that he's a knight and it's required for knights to carry a first aid kit. And then he introduces himself as Lewis. You know, for someone that claims they don't want to be treated like a doll, Scarlett doesn't really do anything to not be treated like a doll. Like, why are we getting carried around by a complete stranger? And for the next part of the story, just bear with me because it's a lot. Scarlett meets up with Samuel, where he talks about consummating their marriage. She obviously doesn't want to sleep with a douche like him, especially when he sees her as a baby-making machine. Not as a woman, not as a human, but as something to produce and take care of his heirs. And then he says, "Don't tell me this is your first time. How predictable. This is why I hate country girls." And tells her to come up to his room when she's ready. But him being so annoyed that it's her first time and making this into a big deal is so frustrating. Because why would anyone want to sleep with someone that looks like this? Scarlett then goes to her room and gets wasted to the point where she cannot even walk properly. And as she's walking towards the door, she is seen breaking down with tears running down her face, saying, "I don't want this to be a measure of what I'm really worth." Scarlett is once again realizing that she has no control over her life. Her worth has been reduced to her body, her fertility, and her role as a wife, rather than who she is as an individual. As she's crying, she runs into Lewis, grabs him, traps him into a room, pushes him against the wall, and starts making out with him, pleading that he help her one more time by sleeping with her. Look, both of them are in the wrong here. First, Scarlett forcing herself onto someone without consent is not okay. Some people try to excuse it by saying she was drunk or emotionally overwhelmed, but that doesn't make it acceptable. I understand why she's doing it. She wants control over her own body and her own future. She wants autonomy. She wants to choose who she sleeps with. But intent doesn't erase harm. When consent is missing and someone is pressured or pushed into a situation, those actions aren't justified no matter the reason. This decision decision from Scarlett has to be the most selfish thing I have ever read. And don't get me started on Lewis. Lewis clearly sees that Scarlett is not in a stable mental or emotional state. She's distressed, desperate, and spiraling. And instead of stopping the situation, he goes along with it. From the outside, it looks like he's taking advantage of someone who's clearly not okay. Some people argue that he had no choice, that he was just following Scarlett's lead. But that's not true. He always had a choice. He could have said no. He could have stopped it. Consent goes both ways, and no still means no, even when the other person is the one pushing. But after Scarlett and Lewis do the thing, Scarlett finally goes to Samuel saying she's ready. But then he says, never mind. Instead, he's going to go spend the night with Joshua. And then he strangles a bird and then dips. I actually can't with this guy. But also, Scarlett just did all that with Lewis for no reason. The following day, Scarlett attends a ball where we meet a new character, Grand Duke Kingsley. And his character design actually looks different from Douchebag 1 and Douchebag 2. But this new character, Kingsley, is the next in line for the throne, since the current king has no heirs of his own, meaning he's basically the crown prince. Scarlett notes something odd about her husband and Kingsley's relationship. Although they are supposed to be childhood best friends, her husband Samuel seems to be hiding something from him, something very important. And remember Lewis from earlier, we find out he's actually a knight loyal to Kingsley. And this guy, why are the men in this webtoon so trash? He turns out to be a spy sent by Kingsley himself, with one clear assignment: seduce Scarlett and squeeze information out of her about Samuel, which makes the scene from earlier even worse than it already was. Lewis took advantage of Scarlett at her lowest point, and there are no arguments to say otherwise. At this point in the story, Scarlett is now creating a plan. Her plan is to not figure out what's going on between Samuel and the Grand Duke Kingsley, and gain his trust in order to find Samuel's weakness and use it to her advantage. Therefore, she can't be Samuel's little doll anymore, and finally be independent. In order to divorce Samuel, she 1. Can't get pregnant by him because she refused to bear that man's child. 2. Make sure she's safe from Samuel and her father's clutches. And 3. Make sure she has enough money and profit in order to live on her own. In order to gain Kingsley's trust, Scarlett meets with Kingsley and they basically go on a date. They flirt a little, smooch a little, and basically pretend that this isn't wildly inappropriate or morally questionable. But this little act seems to work because Kingsley is seen head over heels for her, and this is pretty important for the next part. For how does she plan on making money, you might ask? Well, she wants to start a boat business, specifically by creating something called a gondola. And if you're like me and wondering what the heck are gondolas, well, it's those skinny boats that you see in Venice. It's very touristy and they take you around the canal. Scarlett plans on creating these boats. The idea is to market them to the wealthy, giving nobles a private space to flirt, smooch, or entertain the partners in private, all while enjoying a scenic ride around the canal. And Kingsley, pretty down bad for her at this point, agrees to invest in her business, but in return she has to become his woman. You might have noticed I haven't talked about a pretty important character yet, especially considering how every single plot somehow revolves around them. I'm of course talking about Joshua, aka the other woman that Samuel actually loves. I have mentioned her here and there, but never really talked about her role in the story. To be completely honest, I was really nervous about Joshua as a character, especially because she resembled a lot like Rashta from the webtoon The Remarried Empress. And if you have been on Webtoon in the last couple of years, you would know that Rashta is very hated. Both characters resemble each other in many ways. Both are blonde, whiny, and immediately labeled as the other woman. When we're first introduced to Joshua, with the limited information we're given, we as a reader are supposed to hate her. But it doesn't take long to realize that Joshua is actually a victim. She lost her mom at 6 years old and was left an orphan. 15 years ago, Samuel brought her to his house. She isn't allowed to leave her room unless Samuel allows it. Even though Joshua is 20 years old, she's emotionally stunted, immature with the mindset of a child. She's meant to be Samuel's lover, yet he treats her terribly, grabbing her, yelling at her, and having control over her at every turn. What she is experiencing isn't love. It's a prison, but she doesn't understand that due to Samuel's brainwashing. Samuel isolates her by convincing her that the outside world is dangerous, ensuring she stays confined and dependent on him. And while the story may try to soften this up by saying he didn't touch her until she came of age, that doesn't change the fact that he raised her. He watched her grow up from the age of 6 and shaped her understanding of the world entirely around him. That is grooming, no matter how the narrative narrative tries to frame it. And despite all this, Scarlett doesn't view Joshua as an enemy. She sees her for what she truly is, another one of Samuel's doll. At this point, Scarlett has really grown on me as a character. It was really nice to see her as a girl's girl and helping Joshua. Later, we learn that Samuel tells Joshua that if she gives him a child, he'll never treat it as illegitimate, even though Joshua herself is a commoner. He even claims that Scarlett would raise the child as her own, which is why he needed to marry Scarlett in the first place. And Joshua's role was clear from the beginning. Her only purpose was to conceive a child for him. But why, you might be asking? Nothing has been officially confirmed yet, since the series is still ongoing. That said, readers have been speculating, and honestly the story itself seems to be pointing in this direction. It appears that Joshua may be connected to the royal family in some way, hence the blonde hair, golden eyes, and sad backstory. That would explain why Samuel is so desperate to keep her hidden, especially from Kingsley, the crown prince. If Joshua were to have a child, that child could potentially threaten Kingsley's claim to the throne, and it seems like Samuel has been eyeing the emperor's position the entire time.